Ladies and gentlemen, once again, here we are at the ACHL digital event, and we've got another session. And what a great session it is, with some real passionate men who love their subject matter and love what they do. So first guest up is Vangelis Demosthenous, who's the owner and MD of Kratis. So welcome, Vangelis. Really nice to have you on board.
Nice to see you all.
Appreciate it. And then we've got a little double act. Well, I say little, they're not little. They look like a couple of security bodyguards. But we've got Andy Clemson and we've got Stuart Maddocks, and they are training and coaching specialists who focus on management and leadership as well as sales and commercial. So welcome on board, Andy and Stuart. Really appreciate it.
Nice to see all of you.
Lovely. Now, before we go into any detailed questions or subject matters, what I'd like you both to do, or as two organisations, is firstly just give us a quick overview of what you do and how this damn crisis has affected you over the last 4 to 5 months. So, Vangelis, if we can start with you, please, sir.
Okay. We are a training organisation and consultancy organisation working for over 15 years, specialised mainly in the area of aviation, but also in other sectors. We have a long cooperation with Trinity College in Dublin, and we have also been active with research projects, with some master's degrees. But in general, we offer a lot of training in areas such as SMS, but also in other related areas such as Eastern investigation, human factors, and similar areas. We have the pleasure to work with over 38 countries around the world, with clients ranging from big organizations such as Rolls-Royce, Emirates, Etihad, Cathay Pacific, and other big organizations, but also smaller organizations, again, in different parts of the world. We have been active through these months of COVID, funnily enough, to prepare ourselves in our journey through the distance learning and distance consulting efforts. And we are happy that we have managed to develop products and solutions that we have already been applying with our clients.
Very good, very good. That's what we want to hear. And now over to you guys. So Andy and Stuart.
So we, Chris, for the last 20 odd years have been delivering a lot of management, leadership, sales, star training, and traditionally the model has been face-to-face. But given the crisis that everyone's in, we've also been affected. So we've now had to turn to much more of a virtual offering, because that's the way of the world right now. But what we've worked on over the past in aviation for the last 20 years is for companies like DHL, like Swissport, LSG Sky Chefs, and particularly helping, management teams implement actual core skills into something that can be as standardized in the business to actually make a difference. So I think our pedigree is not so much from a teaching training background. We're experienced managers that have a lot of training experience and know how to get that stuff implemented, because that for me has been a problem over the years, is actually getting that done. So Stuart, I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I think picking up on your point, Chris, about the current situation, it's made us think about what we really do. Are we individuals that just work face-to-face with people? Well, we don't consider ourselves to be that. When we look at the qualities that we bring, we have to look at different mediums and different ways of impacting organisations. And particularly now with the technology that's available, we're able to pivot the way that we operate with organisations and partner with them in different ways. So right now we've looked to bring a blend of new technology and different solutions to organisations so they can embed real change, particularly now because the situation demands real short-term solutions for sustainability and ensuring that kind of business continuity rolls through during these difficult times.
Okay, boys, lovely. Thank you for that. So now what I'll come back to is the basics, and I'll start with you, Vangelis. obviously the bedrock of the aviation industry is built upon safety, 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 safety. So I know how engaged and how passionate you are about safety. One of the things that I'd like to address is, during your years of experience and covering many different companies, what would you say is like the turning point that you see when you're dealing with a company as to a solid foundation that's going to lead to a very successful implementation of a just culture and understanding all of the elements of safety management and the difference between responsibility and accountability?
There are a few elements, of course, but two of the elements that we have seen that they can play a huge impact on the safety performance of an organization. One is the ability to involve all staff into the safety process. So everybody in the organization should be contributing to safety. They should have a clear idea what are the little things that they can do possibly on a daily basis so they can make SMS and safety be successful. So this is number one. The number two is leadership. And I'm looking forward also to listen to Andy and Stuart what they have to say about this. But leadership and safety leadership in this case has a significant impact on the success implementation of SMS and the safety performance of the organization. And so we have seen organizations that they claim that they have a very good SMS in place and they may have a beautiful SMS department and very expensive software to deal with SMS and safety, but they fail to involve everybody in safety. This is, to me, this is very critical. And the understanding, on the other hand, of the management that of all the levels of the management, including the senior management, the line managers, they have to understand that safety responsibility lies on them and not only on the safety department. So this is a big lesson that we need to understand in aviation, in other industries, of course.
Okay, and Vangelis, that's where it's so important for people to understand the difference between responsibility and accountability. And too many people think that if they tell somebody to do something, then it becomes their responsibility, and they almost abdicate their own accountability. And in this day and age now, with some major safety issues like in Beirut, like in Italy, like some of the major issues in aviation and rail transportation, the outcome of the investigations has been very damning on the accountability levels of certain senior managers. So it's so important that they appreciate how much this can impact on the sustainability and continuity of their business, especially as we're in one major crisis already.
Yes. A simple definition for accountability is the responsibilities that you cannot delegate. So for every person in an organization, especially the management, the top management, there are items that, yes, you can delegate to somebody else to do, but there are items that you still accountable for. If I am a CEO of organization or even in the frontline personnel, I still have accountabilities items that I'm accountable in case something happens. So I cannot claim that I don't participate in safety. We have a safety department that does this. We have such and such a person in the organization that looks after this. This is not anymore. The legalities is there. The accountabilities cannot be ignored. We need to deal with those as we should.
I've said to many management units, it would almost be great if you could have an accountability matrix on a table where you could say, look, this is part of your job description, And these are things that you need to be aware of, because so many people don't realize where they have a responsibility and where they have an accountability that remains with them throughout their working life and subject to the positions.
Yeah, we have developed a model the last one couple of years that is called the human contribution model, and we have tried through this model to make it simple for everybody to know what are the limits of their accountability and responsibility, what is expected from them to do on a daily basis as far as safety, what is considered exceptional behavior, what are the minimum competencies people should have to apply their responsibilities and accountabilities, what could be a typical action plan, and so on. So this is a simple plan that is applied to everybody in the organization, and it spells out in clarity what they're supposed to contribute when it comes to safety.
Yep, I think that's a very useful tool, Vangelis. Now, gents, Andy, Stuart, so you've had a little bit of an insight into the passion and the engagement that Vangelis throws into his subject matter, and now I understand that you've got a new sort of concept of how you want to address the various levels of leadership so that people actually understand why. So what helps you, why they should be doing things in a certain way, especially with regard to specialist subject matter like Vangelis produces within his organisation. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, you've got a short video that you'd like to play?
We have, Chris, yeah. We'd like to play that.
Nice, simple video with lots of relevant messages, and a nice segue and link with what Vangelis was talking about regarding accountability and also leaders and the future. The keywords that jumped out at me there were simplicity, testing, verification of compliance, and also accountability.
Yeah.
So that's so important. Now, with the points that Vangelis covered about some of the observations of how successful implementation of SMS and everything that goes around that suite of safety requirements, would you endorse that? And how are you addressing now the understanding of why leaders need to understand and do things differently?
Yeah.
I think it's a really important point, Chris. When Vangelis was talking earlier on about the model that they've introduced, it really resonated with us, and you can see a lot of shared approaches and understanding to that from a training perspective. I guess the golden thread for us, Chris and Vangelis, is the implementation of any type of training, be it specific safety training or other technical training, is only as strong as the people that are implementing it. So the management and leadership within the organization need to take responsibility for how that training gets embedded within the organization. So we need to think about very, very clearly who's accountable for what behaviors are going to be influenced, and how are you going to verify and validate that those behaviors have changed to the required standard. So, our angle around leadership and management, the template that we look at things through is how effective is that implementation going to be? And I think the time has come to change people's view about what training partnerships look like and migrate or move away from it being an add-on to the operation, to it being an integral part of how you succeed. So for continuity and sustainability now, and agility and I guess ultimately the resilience side of the business, we've got to become more integrated into the way that our partnership organizations work with us. So it's about getting that implementation very, very strong for us.
Yeah, I agree. And what you said there about whether you call it training or people come up with a new fancy name or whatever, but the concept is that it now more than ever is a key ingredient in the success formula of what you said, which is business continuity and sustainability, and to help organizations become more agile and resilient. And all of the press now around the world is talking about second waves and spikes, and everybody is going to be affected over the next 4 to 5 to 6 months. So those pressures are going to be ever more in the face of everybody. So they need to understand now, how can the senior C-suite of organizations help the total organization by creating a different leadership model that fits in with this current crisis. Now, just back to you, Vangelis. One of the things that I know that you also specialize in is, root cause analysis and investigation around safety. Now, again, just coming back, when you go through certain key areas that you've had to get involved in or you used as examples, the root cause often is the way things are implemented and how they're managed and how the leaders understand. Is correct?
Yeah, this is absolutely correct. And it also connects with what Stuart was saying before, is the actual the effectiveness of implementation of things. It's one thing to have an SMS, and it's another thing to have an effective SMS. And this is where is a big difference. And if we come to the contribution of the management again, or the leadership into the effectiveness of SMS, is crucial. Unless we have the contribution of the management, it's very hard to implement the correct SMS. But it's not only this, is how the different systems in place, they enable the proper implementation of SMS. So we may have a perfect training delivered, but unless the systems in place and the processes in place allow this training to be implemented, is another thing.
Yeah.
And many times we give a lot of attention to have a good training in place, but we don't deal with how this is going to implement it. Yeah? And what is following up after the training? Because it's not enough to have a good training in place, is to prepare the ground for the training to be effective.
Yeah.
You know? To have the right tools in place, the right people in place, the right process in place, and also to have the willingness of the management to embrace this. If there is no willingness of the management to embrace the learning from a training, that most of the times this training goes wasted.
Exactly. And it's also a waste of money. It's a waste of people's time who wanted to commit to it. And it's a waste of the whole company's efforts.
Can I just add something there, Chris, to what Vangelis was saying?
Yeah.
You know, we've seen that historically, and I totally agree with what Vangelis just said. There's almost, in a lot of cases, an abdication of once training, whether it's either internal or it's external. Once that has been set, it's almost that responsibility is set to that person. Go and do it. And then the message is they're told how or what to do, but there's no follow-up.
Yeah.
So the management does not take enough responsibility to say, right, okay, you've been on that course. Now let's verify what you've actually done, what you've learned, but more importantly, what you're going to do, and let me see you actually do it so I can see clearly that we now have that focus and that implementation of that SMS system, whatever it is, done properly to the right standard. And I think for me, over the years, that's what we don't see enough of, is that follow-up. And I think that's where, you know, us and Vangelis, you know, we dovetail perfectly, because that's the bit that we want to focus on, getting these leadership teams to do the right thing with clarity and have a great level of competence across the people they are influencing.
If I am a supervisor or a manager, I have a responsibility not only to send my people to training, but I have a responsibility to follow up, to see that the learning they have gained through this training is applied at work. It's my responsibility to do that.
You mentioned very early on, Vangelis, you know, often that is given to the training department typically, and it's not enough. That's not good enough anymore. Given the situation we're in, it's got to change.
Yep. And one of the things that I've observed, and like you just said there, it's given to the training department, or when the management, they have to go through their budget and their planning exercises, they look at what training is required for a tick box exercise, whether it's to do with accreditation or it's just regulatory training, etc. So they fill it in and it's done. But I think one of the things that should be in place is everybody who's sent on a training course should be told why they're going on that training course before they attend it.
Yeah.
And they should also be told what's expected of them when they're attending, and how the impact of that training will be measured by the organisation, and expected to have feedback from the people who attend the training courses as well. And if that loop started to become more effective and was seen as part of the integral integration of the sometimes very expensive budgets that are spent on training, then there'd be a better chance. And if at the same time people are trained how to lead people and communicate and understand, then we've got a much better platform. Now, your points with the 4 C's, I think you can actually break the two of them up, because you focused on clarity, and in the video, there's a lot of emphasis on simplicity. And even governments and WHO and everybody is realizing now, if you give too many people too many options, you've got too much confusion. So you need to keep it very simple, very structured, and have that clarity. So you mentioned clarity. If you have simplicity and clarity, you've got a much better chance of controls. So I think that's the one pairing. And then with your compliance and competence, if people are proven to be competent, you've got a much greater chance of being compliant. And if you focus on compliance, you need people to be competent in order to deliver that. So the whole framework around that 4 C's is all about communication, communicate, communication, and communicate. And I think that's sometimes where because of external pressures or crisis or targets or revenue budgets or whatever it is, it sometimes gets pushed down the ladder or pushed down the list of priorities. And I think that's where it falls down. So a question I've got for you, Vangelis, with safety review committees and SAG meetings, etc., surely now the topic of business continuity and sustainability, as well as resilience and agility, should now be part of that overall agenda or regular points that appear on those meeting minutes?
Yeah, the safety is not happening only in safety committees. It happens in every single meeting of the organization. So if you take a management meeting, a daily management meeting, safety should be part of this. Yes? Even if we don't name a safety item on the agenda, which is possible and is desirable to do, a lot of the items, a lot of the discussions, they have safety part of this. And the organization needs to realize that safety doesn't happen only in safety meetings, it happens on a daily basis. And they have to manage this in a better way so they can realize that when they make decisions, they have an impact on safety. And this impact should be measured, and it should be data should be taken into consideration before they make any decisions. You know? So the ICAO now with the new manual, it hammers on the importance of data. The new manual 2018, it has 8 chapters. 3 of these chapters that they are dedicated to data. Yes, and they have an approach is called data-driven decision making, DDDM. This approach is not an aviation invention. It's something that comes from other industries, but it is an approach that makes sense. You need to consult data when you make decisions, and it doesn't need to be too complicated data. You should be consulting data that it can help you to make a decision that it makes sense. It's a decision that it saves money. It gives you priorities on where to place your resources. It gives you a clear idea on how you manage your risks and how you manage your operations to minimize your risk.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Now, also just flipping across to Andy and Stuart, I know that you guys were talking about, always having priorities with regards to management and understanding that they should be managing trends and events, not always focusing on individual issues unless those individual issues are critical. And that also brings into a discussion that we had about, prioritizing any activities lists or objectives into critical, important and recommended, so that there's real focus by the leaders on what's important for the business, again, to endorse continuity and sustainability. So with that in mind, do you feel now that this new approach is going to achieve those objectives to make people understand that if you have something that's so important to the business, like the overall safety topic, that by having additional support or coaching or guidelines or mentoring, whatever you want to call it, that will help the implementation of such important areas as safety?
Yeah, I think, Chris, it's absolutely critical that we do that, and that organisations partner with other organisations like Vangelis, ourselves, and other partners to ensure that they get the right support in order to do that. So you can see within the model that we've shared today that the first aspect about clarity is something that isn't always done well. The clarity of kind of simple rules, simple guidelines, simple actions is sometimes done well with the what, so the expectation about what we want people to do. But you alluded to before, the really important or more important aspect of the why. So when people connect with the things that they've got to do and understand the rationale for it, I mean, even from childhood, we've got that natural curiosity. We don't just want to be told to do something. We want to really understand why we should be doing it. So once we can get that and we can focus in with laser-like precision about what competence we need, and then link it to how we comply with that competence. If we stick to the model that we're suggesting, it gives us more control, because those managers need to take full accountability for how you embed the stuff that you're trying to do properly. But until you identify it and make it clear within the organisation, so everybody understands, from the executive team right the way through the hierarchy, down to the people that are actually delivering for the customer, it's very difficult to keep that continuity. So how can we sustain during difficult times if we've not got that clarity?
Yeah.
And in simplicity, Chris, you know, for me, it's all about expectations. Every role should have a clear expectation, because if you haven't got that, what are you actually measuring? And, you know, and that's not there enough. It's almost like the view of how training is perceived throughout all of the levels. And that for me has got to change, because if you understand the why, the reason I'm going on that training is because I'm clear of this helps me to understand not only objectives, but what that relates to in terms of the business as a whole. And the situation we're now, it is critical. We need change.
And also for individuals to understand how they can self-assess the impact of the training and the benefit, they need to be given that sort of appreciation and understanding. Do you know something, guys? I know you're all parents, and I think we're all at fault, because when your kids are growing up, all they do is ask you why. Yeah. And at some point we all lose it and say, because I've told you why, that's why. And I think we knock that inquisitiveness and that, you know, that wanting to know the reasons out of people. And then unfortunately we tend to do that in work as well, because people don't have the time to explain the why or to really put it across. And I think that's something that we need to return to make everybody really appreciate it. Now, coming back to assessing the success of a training course, or assessing the success of the impact that's expected from the training course. Vangelis, do you think organisations do that well enough, or do you think there's room now for people who deliver specialist training like yourself, or like yourself, Andy and Stuart? Do you think there's a way now to start to show a more dynamic trigger system or appreciation of what is deemed as being successful, not just the delivery of the training, but the actual acceptance and implementation of it in the workplace after a period of time, whatever that period of time would be?
But I think we can, it's not a secret that in most of the cases, organizations supply training and they are not aware of the effectiveness of the training. This is what is happening in most of the cases in our experience around the world. You know, there is no methodology for checking the effectiveness of the training and the impact of the training on the organization itself. So this is, of course, this is becoming vital these days. Why? Because training is, I have in front of me a study that was made by IASA, different organizations like ICAO, IATA, FAA, IASA, made a few studies now with COVID. That's one of the studies that IASA has done, and we were involved in the Human Factors Advisory Group that I'm a member of IASA. It has put into different risk levels, the different activities. And one is the SMS, it's called the management system. The second one is human performance. And the third one is training, checking, and recency. So training mostly. So training is the number 3 item that as far as risk level. So we have and with the limitations of the industry, when they reopen the organizations, when they go back to operation, they will have limited resources, limited financials, limited staff, so they need to make the best out of this staff. They have no choice. Yeah. They cannot afford anymore to offer training without being sure that this training will be effective, or it is effective on the organization. There is no choice anymore. There is no boundary that you can work as possibly the industry had in the past. You throw a lot of training and you hope that it will work.
Yeah.
Now you don't have this choice now. You have to ensure that the training you offer to the people, it has the best return that you can get.
100%, and especially now when cash flow is such a critical issue, and payments and limiting things to the real necessities and urgency. It's interesting that on that risk list that it comes out at number 3, but it also affects number 1 and number 2.
Of course. SMS and human performance, they're all connected, these items. Yes, the next items I can see there is outdated information, infrastructure and equipment, financial impact. And you can see that these three, they become top. Yes?
Yeah.
And no wonder why they are top. You know?
Yeah.
And they vary drastically on the level of risk from the other items.
Yeah, and especially when those critical areas have such an impact on consumer confidence, the last thing people want to see now is anything that affects the one thing that everybody acknowledges within our industry, the aviation industry, and the importance of safety in all other industries is safety, safety, safety.
Yes. And unless the organization start to prepare from now how there's going to be the next day, what they should put in place in order to ensure that things are done effectively and correctly, is very hard to manage this.
Yeah.
So the minimum they can do is to prepare appropriately the personnel to manage these big changes.
Yeah, and these changes, and that comes back over to you now, Andy and Stuart. These big changes are new to a lot of people, because there are certain people now, because of various redundancies, furlough schemes, etc. There are certain people now that are going to have to step up and take on certain additional responsibilities and accountabilities. And to be fair to them, just because they've been good or they're seen as potential in their previous positions, they need that extra bit of support and understanding and appreciation of what's ahead of them by giving them a different set of skills and coaching or mentoring.
When it comes to safety as a critical focus, Chris, there is no compromise. And, you can have someone that's got the right attitude, the right behaviours, but if they haven't got the competence, because they're now having to do a role that they didn't do previously because now there's 3 people less in that team, then that is a risk. That's got to be mitigated surely by having the right training to ensure then they have the competence to do things right. It's critical. And this, for me, is the time. It's like a forced reboot, isn't it, given the crisis the industry is in?
Yeah.
Now it's time to think about, right, what is the right training, linked to what Vangelis is saying, and then ensure that it's implemented across every single level of management. It's everyone's responsibility, Chris.
Yeah. And when I look at the roll call of companies that you guys have interacted with, similar to Kratis, who's got a huge portfolio of business partners. I mean, you guys have hit DHL, Swissport, Jerry's Donata, Uniload, LSG, Sky Chefs, Google, Oracle, HSBC, British Gas, AstraZeneca, Sanofi. So obviously the vaccines and pharmaceutical is going to be a critical area as well. But you've also got NHS, Currency Exchange, and you've also got a list of universities there. The University of London, Loughborough, Sussex, and also Brighton. So following the same links that Vangelis has got, education, communication, and verification and validation of those skills, but the benefits of it and the impact is so important now more than ever.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Chris, I'd like to put a question to Vangelis based on the fact that we deal in kind of similar or related issues. One thing that if we go back to the clarity thing that we talked about before, Chris.
Yeah.
I think there's an ever increasing importance now on the relationship between the training provider and the partner organisation to really nail down the specifics about what the expectation for the training is.
Yeah.
If we go back to Vangelis talking about sometimes, we don't get full delivery or embedding of the training because it's not followed up properly, which is absolutely right. We see that. We've often found over the years that there hasn't been as stronger focus on developing what the expectation is around the whole program. So training is often lumped into, is it a good return on investment?
Yeah.
Whereas if we look at it about from the angle of, is it a good return on expectation? And we start to think, let's get better at clarifying what the expectation is around what the implementation will be. And we focus on that initially, we might end up getting some proper traction. And that area of the consulting process, I think, needs to come under the microscope from both sides, which is a change, because everything's changed now, we know. And if we want to go from crisis to care to a more positive situation, that's one of the areas that we feel will make a difference. What's your experience, Vangelis, with that?
We have been working with various organizations that they are willing to to invest in making a good training. And what we apply, of course, and I'm sure you apply a similar way, is to do a proper training needs analysis at the beginning. Whereas in this stage, you identify what are the organizational objectives we want to achieve, what are the behavior or performance objectives we want to achieve at the workplace, what are the learning objectives, but also we identify what are the organizational issues or interventions that need to be made for the training to be effective. Because most of the times the training by itself is not the solution.
Yeah.
So you need to set up from the very beginning that this is what we are trying to achieve within the class or through the training. This is what the organization needs to do for the training to be effective. Yes, and also at the same time develop an evaluation methodology. How am I going to evaluate that whatever I deliver, it will be effective? Yes, so we try through this trainings analysis to provide a clear picture of what are we trying to achieve, what the organization is supposed to do, what will be the follow-up process, and how we will evaluate its effectiveness. And so it has to be a complete package. Otherwise, we just throw and we hope for the best. And we're shooting in the dark. If we just throw any training and we hope that it will work, it doesn't work most of the times.
Yeah.
So it has to be a complete approach.
Yeah. And that's the sad thing that an awful lot of people in those senior positions, and through no fault of their own, it's just the way it is, external pressures distract them and they don't get the chance to actually focus on whether or not the expectations have been met and how effective those expectations actually are.
Chris, can I just say, for me, adding to what was just been said, this is where the mind shift comes in, because I think historically we see it across different industries. There's often over focus on just the task or the process. But ultimately, it's people that implement processes. And you've got to have that correlation between the level of direction and support to ensure that people have that right skill base, competence, whatever else, to ensure they can then follow that process. And often it's a disconnect. It's not there.
Yeah.
Particularly from, grades of supervisory above. That's where it's critical.
Yeah.
But there's not enough training and support for these guys. It's a case of just do it.
Yeah. And I think now
it's your job, but they haven't got the confidence often to do that.
Yeah. No, I agree.
With the people.
I agree. And I think now more than ever, with so many anxieties and the human factor issue, when people come back to work and they're worrying about whether or not there's childcare, are their kids at school, are their grandparents or family members at risk? And now that there's going to be more pressures on the economy and everything, worrying about their jobs, it's keeping people focused as well and letting the new leadership styles be appreciative of all of those things so that they can take it into account. So a lot to do, but it's necessary to do it in the right way. And with people like yourselves and as passionate as the three of you are, I think there's great opportunities ahead for the industry. So before we finish, gents, because we're getting near to the end of the session, what I want to do is I want to ask each of you, not three of you, but each of your organisations, if you can just give me what you think are areas whereby you could commit to collaboration or initiatives or delivering things that would benefit the supply chain. So 3 things. So I'll start with you, Vangelis.
One thing is that we have been offering distance learning solutions. And distance learning solutions, not only the asynchronous one, where we have the e-learning programs where somebody can attend at any time, but also synchronous training. We have been offering a lot of the live webinars, and I'm sure Andy and Stuart have been doing in a similar way. That is, so we have included all of our training programs, and we can offer them, and we have been offering a lot of those programs through a distance learning approach. So this is definitely one thing that we can do. We can work in identifying within organizations exactly what is the contribution of each of the staff into the safety process. So through the human contribution model.
Yeah.
And we can also look and make a study in the organization to identify exactly the training needs and come up with a clear program as far as how and when these needs can be met.
Okay, very, very good. Right, thank you for that, Vangelis. Now, back to you guys, Andy and Stuart. So we've had the three things that you'd like to commit to, and now if you can just give us three things that you think would be great to enhance your impact on the business. So what three items would you like to see being incorporated or supported from your customers and the community and the aviation industry?
Yeah, I think, Chris, for me, one thing that's really come out, it's almost been the golden thread in the conversation, is the need to integrate training more within the business.
Yeah.
So yes, where you've got internal training departments, that happens, but when you partner with external consultancies for additional expertise, really having an attitude that allows us to be engulfed within the operation so that we can truly partner and get really under the skin of what needs to be done. So having a much closer relationship in the future about how we partner collaboratively to really embed and get the results that we're looking for. That would be one thing that we would ask for. Some people are good at that already. Others might want to think about what their approach is about that.
And by doing that, Stuart, that also helps the training departments as well, who sometimes have to be led by the operations, and it will just give them a better overview to be advising the operations what the values are, what the principles, the reasons why, etc., before they actually request a lot of this training. Because obviously the training department, that, depending on the type of organisation, is very difficult for them to say, are you sure you want this training? Are you sure you need this at this moment? Are you sure it's right for you? So it could help them there as well.
Yeah. I think another one, Chris, for me is the perception of the value of particularly training managers. So yeah, organisations know they have to do the mandatory, there's no choice, but they do or have had a choice with management training in the past. But for me, the two are inextricably linked.
Yeah.
And, you've got to have that support and the understanding of managers to know how the mandatory training is actually going to be implemented. Otherwise, you just cross your fingers and hope managers do their best. But that's not good enough, particularly in the situation that the industry is in right now. Right first time approach with the right people, with the right competencies, full stop.
Yep, saves money, saves time, and keeps it simple.
Yeah. I've got another one in respect of, so for all the senior leaders out there that are steering their organisations at the moment from crisis to care, I think one thing that I would like to challenge under these times of real reflection is, yes, the figures are really important and the targets are important to get back on track, but always remember how you do that, and it's through motivated individuals that feel like they are developed and a part of the business. So therefore, from our perspective, is what is the value of that in itself in relation to achieving the targets and goals that you've got?
Yeah, no, that's a good one. That's a deep one. That's something that Salem would appreciate.
Well, for me, Chris, it's as simple as, often there is massive focus on the result. But as I always say to people, it's typically your staff, your people, your bodies that actually give you the result. And if you're going to do that, then focus on your people as well as the result. Yeah,
which comes down again to care. Huh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cheers, lads. And Vangelis, three things you'd like to see?
Okay, I think the gentleman stole a lot of my thinking, and I'm glad that we think alike. So I have 3 points. One is people, leadership, and training. So very similar to what my colleague said before. The first one is to give attention to people. So readdress the role of the people in the organization. See how we can make the best of. We don't have much chances now to fool around with tests and so on. So we need to be very specific on the role of the people. We need to give attention to the people. We need to listen to the people more and make sure that we manage our human resources in a much better way than before. That's number one. Number two is the development and the support of leadership. Now the leadership will be in a much greater pressure than before, to deliver, to be successful, to survive the organization and so on. So we need to both develop them and also support them. And number three, about training, similar to what my colleague said before, is we need to be very demanding as organization as to what we expect to get out of a training. So we need to have a full, when we request the training, we need also to request how you're going to make sure that this training is going to be valuable for the organization, how you're going to evaluate this training, how you want to ensure that this is the right training, and so on. So we don't want just to be given a training. We need to have the whole package. So these are my 3 points.
Very good, gentlemen. Excellent. We've come to the end of the session. Lovely discussion, lots of food for thought, and a very international table we've had. So we've got you, Vangelis, in Cyprus, and we've got 2 Northerners. We've got a Liverpudlian, and I'm not sure, Andy, where's your home territory? What would you be called?
Well, a Brummie originally, I would say.
A Brummie. So for anybody listening, that means Birmingham. So I would suggest anybody thinking where the problem with the understanding of English would be, it's not Vangelis. So for anybody who doesn't understand the other 2 guys, I do apologise. They don't speak the Queen's English like myself. But seriously, taken away from a bit of humour there. Well done. Good luck with what you're doing. And it's definitely important, and more now than ever before. And the more confidence and the more understanding and clarity we can give to people who are taking the responsibilities now, especially the frontline workers who deserve so much respect and regard. Good luck to everything that you're doing. So thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
Cheers, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Salam. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Stuart.
Yeah, speak soon, Vangelis. All the best.
Thanks,
Cheers,
Salam.
guys.